Ndinoda kuti nyika isiwe vanhu vangu inguva yedu hatingatadzi kubudirira Mwari ari parutivi pedu rambai muchirwa
My hitters don't die, and real hitters gon' shine, and my people gon' rise. That's my point to it, yeah. I ain't saying
But the hell do I not have a deal? I swear this thing is a real dog. I play fan off the cowards so they can't feel. The wife try to console me like it's coming, baby, chill. She don't understand. I'm the only one that's real. I remember the third grade. Them kids, they had waves. I had them BDBs. You know that Zimbabwean bread. So they do shades. And your boy hit the stage, press play, and all the chicks was like, yeah. While boys was moving bricks, I was moving chips. Yeah. If she gave me calculus, gave her a mouthful of it. Heat rose to this thing, boy, I bet on myself.
Grand Rising, everyone. Welcome to the Day with Trae. I'm your host, Trae Holiday. And joining me today, I'm really excited because I haven't sat with Cesar in a really long time. Cesar Canizales is in the building. We're going to be talking about some of the stories he's been covering out here in community and the importance of independent media so that we can be on the scene covering these stories that sometimes are not covered by anyone else. And so I'm excited that Cesar is here to shine some light on some of those stories. But of course, it is the top of the show, so it's a great time to tag and share the stream. That's right. Go ahead and participate by tagging and sharing the stream with folks you feel could benefit from a daily dose of dopeness right here on the Day with Trae. And if you cannot watch us on this amazing TV show, don't worry. You know, you may miss some of my fabulous outfits, but we got you covered on the podcast. Just go to your favorite podcast platform and search Converge Media Network and the Day with Trae. Y'all will find me on Google, Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, Apple Music, whichever one is your favorite. Y'all will find me there. So search us, find us, help share us, tell people about us. We appreciate all of that work and that collaboration right here on the Day with Trae in the Black Media Matters studios. But without further ado, Cesar's been busy pounding the pavement. And for all of those who are following us, particularly on our Instagram channels, y'all are seeing these amazing stories come out. But if you don't follow us on YouTube, do that too. Cesar is so phenomenal in the ways that he shapes and tells stories, bringing his years of expertise to these amazing stories happening in our community. What's up, Cesar?
Hi, Trae. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad that you had time because it just looks like you've been one busy guy out here doing it all. You carry the camera, you got the audio, you're editing the stories, but you really have an extensive background in this. And for those who may not know, just give us a bit of your background that brought you to be like, this is how I'm bringing myself to see myself as a part of the solution by sharing these stories. Tell us a bit about your background.
Well, you know, I worked for about 20 years in TV news as a producer. I was never the guy on camera until now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I worked for a couple of networks, mostly in Washington, D.C. and Dallas, Texas, doing politics and natural disasters, also man-made disasters like terrorist acts and shootings and things like that. But now that I'm in Seattle, you know, I worked in a nonprofit organization here in Seattle, United Way of King County, and it really, opened my eyes even more about, what happens to people of color, Black people, brown people like me, what we had to go through. You know, I've been the recipient of racist attacks, verbal attacks, nothing violent or anything like that, but nothing like you see now with, George Floyd and other cases where people like Black people just get killed. So that my focus now is trying to bring those stories of what's happening out in the community, in our community, in Seattle, in South Seattle, in the Central District, and bring in you those stories.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you for pounding the pavement the way you do, because honestly, like you got a call from me yesterday. I'm like, Cesar, something's going down in the morning. Like, can you be there? And it's a beautiful thing to be able to have that independently as a media company, because there are so many things going on all the time that just don't get the light of day. And I can imagine that what you're doing now, more on this independent track, is very different than what you were doing when you were part of networks. Am I right?
Oh yeah, I mean every event that I covered, with the networks, you would have 30 cameras. Nowadays, in some of the stories that I cover, I am the only media person there, like literally the only person with a camera and trying to do these stories. You know, we were talking earlier before we got on the show about Rainier Beach High School and how they had two town halls about gun violence and just violence in general in their communities and down south. The first town hall, it's like really, really important one. I was the only camera there. I was the only media person there. And I brought that story to you to Converge. Just after I talked to all these kids and listening to them, listening to the students talk about what they go through, like they don't feel safe in and around school. And they don't feel like they can call 911 because they don't know if the police is there for them or against them. The second town hall, there was one other print reporter there, but that was it. And that was with Chief Diaz, the police chief Diaz. He was there. And again, I was the only one. And interestingly, there was a third one just a few weeks after that at Roosevelt High School. And that, interestingly, got some coverage from the Seattle Times. And again, we talk about, the North versus the South Seattle, the I guess marginalized communities don't get as much coverage, if you will. The underserved communities, the Central District and South Seattle, Rainier Beach area.
Well,
So,
they continue to be underserved, right? I mean,
correct.
You're talking about it right there, and it's like, okay, what's the difference between students at Roosevelt coming together to talk about gun violence and students at Rainier Beach, right? And particularly because, to be honest, what we heard in the pieces you covered at Rainier Beach was these students are dealing with it in a real personalized, impactful way, where it is making them have to adjust their lives because they're losing friends. Their friends are getting shot, getting harmed, being injured, right? People that they know. Like, this is happening to them in a sense, based on their friend groups and peer groups, and their personal approach to what they shared. And the reason why it was so important to get Chief Diaz there was so key to that. But again, thank you for being on the ground and for covering stories like this.
Course.
I mean, this for me, Cesar, is honestly one of those things that, as a mother, I'm in the Federal Way area, and I'm always saying, Federal Way now has 14% Black families, but there isn't enough happening to really center those families' lived experience with regard to creating new policy legislation that addresses some of the disparities that families face, particularly families from the global majority. And I use global majority instead of BIPOC because I realize that's exactly what we are. We've never been minorities. These kind of words matter. And I appreciate that you have been on the ground. You've been covering a lot of different stories, though. What are some of the ones that really stick out to you in the recent months since you've been with me that you've been able to cover? That's a great one there with Rainier Beach. What's another story that you've been able to cover where maybe you were the only one?
It's kind of sad, but one of the most impactful ones also was the Elijah Lewis, where I saw you, the remembrance event. And again, it's the unfortunate gun violence. Those are some of the stories I cover. Some other lighter stories. Like the Odessa Brown Children's Clinic down South Seattle. They opened up last year, and they've had a couple of events there. They opened up an outdoor patio for kids, because it's not just a clinic. There's also a preschool childcare center, and they opened out this outdoor learning area, like a classroom, where and I got to interview kids. And I don't know if you remember seeing some of the video that I got. That the kids wanted to be on camera, and then they got shy, so I had to like chase them, with a smile. Come on, talk to me. That was really fun. But those stories are really, they always stick out because I love kids, and it's always fun to talk to them. And the interviews that I got were interesting. They were kind of funny because they At first, they really want to do it, and then they just go shy and they don't know what to do. But but I'm also I'm working on a story, an interesting story. It's going to be a little bit of a longer format because it's there's a lot of history. The Houston family, they moved from Louisiana down south to um, they moved to Renton in the 1950s, and they bought land. They bought 10 acres of land in unincorporated King County, not quite Renton at the time. It was 10 acres. In the 1960s, they suffered through fires, arson, one bombing. The school district was trying to buy the land from this family. The family refused because they used to make their living. That was their home. They lived off the land, farming, raising pigs and chickens and all that. They didn't want to sell the land. The school district threatened eminent domain, and they forced them to sell the land, taking everything away from them. The family broke up. It's heartbreaking. But I'm going to tell that story. I've done interviews with the two of the sons. They have children and grandchildren. The family is now trying to seek reparations from the school district because the school district bought the land on the grounds that they were going to put up a new school on that farm, and they never built it. And 10 years later, after they bought the land, they sold it to developers. Developers came in and built 200 houses on that land. The family was left with nothing. One of the things this gentleman, John Houston, told me was, my mother did everything right through her life, trying to raise kids, and she died penniless. So they're hoping, after they saw what happened at Bruce Beach in Los Angeles, where 100 years ago, Los Angeles took the land from this black family through eminent domain. 2 years ago, the Bruce family descendants sought reparations from the city. And I believe it was last year, they finally got some. The city, I think the deal was they gave them the descendants the land back, and the descendants sold the city, the beach back to the city, and they made money that way. Now I guess they divided it among all the family members.
Wow.
But that gave the Houston family, the Houston descendants here in Renton, gave them hope that maybe that something like that could be done for them.
Well, again, these are the kind of stories, I'll say too, when I was in major news network, there were so many different things that were coming through the assignment line, right? I was working the assignment desk, and it'd be like all these amazing human interest stories. And so we would have a log of them, and some producers were able to pick them up or not. And we started to realize, and this, the stories that come through the wire are the ones that get the priority. And so nationally, there is this wire where stories come through, and that's how stories get picked up. And that's how, we end up seeing a lot of the same headlines across the country because of this national wire where stories come through. But I realized that there was so much inspiration and different types of news stories that were being left in this backlog of like human interest stories. And, it's just the way that major networks are set up. It's not, the producer's fault, or really, I don't know if there's fault involved. It's just the way that they're set up to tell certain news stories, that these kinds of news stories often don't see the light of day on those networks. And so you being able to find stories like this and to shine a light on them, tell us about that process, because something like that is a phenomenal story happening right here in our backyard in Renton, right here in unincorporated King County, or in King County in Renton. This is major news, right? Because again, 200 homes, that is a huge plot of land where a developer was able to come in and rake money off the coals. And I always want to follow the numbers. But how do you find a story like that, Cesar?
We are fortunate, people contact Converge, they contact Amari and let him know stories that are happening. It was the same thing with the Rainier Beach High School Town Hall. Somebody told him that this was happening. This story came in the same way, we're fortunate that we have community members who contact Converge and let us know what is happening. We look at all the stories. This story, obviously, it's this going to be a little longer. It takes a little more time to develop this, but I've done several interviews. People's memories fade, but in this case, they have not faded. The James Houston, the brother of John Houston, who lives out in Bremerton, I went down there to interview him, and we spoke for an hour and a half about his life and how it all happened, because he's a little older, so he remembers all this very clearly. Like, he remembers the bomb that went off on their porch and left a hole on the ground and like knocked down the door. But things like that, stories like that, just come to us from community members.
That's really a shining testament to the impact that Converge has had on community, for us to be able to be there in a way that we're accessible to community members, to be able to reach out and share these stories. And it's so interesting because I have stories come to me and I'm always like, how can we make sure that we do this story justice? And I'm grateful that this work allows us to kind of sometimes see in between the cracks a bit too, about how to actually shape these kinds of stories in ways that we know are going to produce impactful media once we're done with something. So I appreciate that you've been there and been a trusted source as a partner with us at Converge, and really a Converge correspondent, going out to capture all of this amazing inspiration that's going on in our community. Cesar, I can't thank you enough. And I want to publicly thank you for being there this morning.
Thank you.
Something came through. Again, I'm sure we'll be seeing the fruits of that work. But I just thank you. I don't know if you also share these stories on your personal Instagram or anything like that, but I want to be able, if folks are like, hey, I need to connect with Cesar, or I want to, send some stuff to Converge, let them know right there. Look in that camera. Let them know how you do it.
So I am on Instagram, and I share all the stories on Instagram. I used to be on Twitter. I left Twitter a few months ago, and on LinkedIn. But on Instagram, you can find me at Canizales25. So that's CCANIZALES 25. That's where I am, and you'll see my portrait picture on Instagram is me trying to interview one of those kids that I was talking about earlier. He's hiding inside like this toy house, and I have my microphone stuck in the house trying to interview this kid. It's the funniest thing. But it was, one of those fun stories. Not everything has to be hard news and has to be difficult. Some of those stories can be fun.
That's right. And we love to say, here, like, let's not leave people in an affected state. Thank you so much, Cesar, for being a part of Converge and being out here on the ground telling these stories. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Trae. Appreciate
Absolutely. It. Oh, y'all, just great to hear, all of these great stories Cesar has going on. I actually have a special guest in the building. I get to talk to somebody who's also covering amazing stories, because we got Brian Callanan in the building. I get to chop it up with my guy, Brian, right after this short break. Stay tuned, y'all. You're watching The Day with Trae.
COVID-19 hurt my income, my health, and my family. We were about to lose our home when we heard we might be eligible for homeowner assistance funds from the government. We called 1-877-894-HOME, and a housing counselor stepped in. They talked to our lender and saved our home. Because falling on hard times does not have to mean losing your home. Federal funding details at washingtonhaf.org.
What's up, everybody? Me and Besa, my girl, we had to pull up to Market Street Shoes once again, y'all.
And we do this every season. We have to get the new shoes, the new boots, and this time I even got a coat.
Yeah, no, you did walk in without a coat.
I really
I'm glad you found one. But their boots were on point.
Yes, the boots, the bags. I even grabbed a flannel.
Yeah, you did. And I was able to get some hats and everything. I was really impressed.
And I was impressed because, of course, I got those white boots that you guys see me wearing everywhere these days.
Yeah, no, I look at your white boots and I'm like, darn it, they only have one pair. Me and Basie wear the same size. Of course, every time we walk out with several bags in hand.
Several bags and sometimes even a backpack, you guys. Make sure you check out Market Street Shoes.
Yeah, please check them out. Where they go, Basie?
Ooh, 2232 Northwest Market Street, Seattle, Washington.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Day with Trae. I'm your host, Trae Holiday. Joining me right now is my guy, Brian Callanan from Seattle News, Views, and Brews. What's up, Brian?
Oh, it's good to be here, Trae. Thanks for having me on the show again.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure. I'm glad we can get you here today.
I know. It's a special day. It's a little special Thursday.
Well, we got special guests in the building, too. I got to give a shout out. Tell us who's in the building with us, Brian.
My mom and dad, Joan and Charles Callanan, are here, and they're very excited about being inside to get a daily dose of dopeness with you, Trae. You know what it's all about.
Right on. Yeah. I love it. And welcome so much. Well, Brian, y'all definitely talked about a lot yesterday on Seattle News, Views, and Brews. And I know we did some pre-recordings, but I wanted to hear some of these topics because we got some hot topics going on right now.
We really do. And this is, I guess, just a recap of what was on Seattle News, Views, and Brews last night here on Converge at 7. But I did want to talk about what's going on with the governor's race. The fact that Governor Inslee is not running again, our 23rd governor, has been there for 3 terms, which ties him as the longest running governor in our state. He's not running again. That really, it opens up the field in some ways, but I think we all know some of the candidates that are really wanting to replace him. And right now we're looking at Attorney General Bob Ferguson. He came out with an announcement like less than 24 hours after Jay Inslee made his announcement. So he was ready to go, had a 3.5-minute ad all dialed up. He's got a lot of money in his coffers in terms of campaign dollars out there. Hillary Franz is also going to be running. She's the commissioner of public lands. So those are the top 2 Dems. In terms of the Republican side, I think that's the very interesting story. Very open field there. There's a candidate from Richland who's a school board member there, but looks like that school board member is actually under investigation for some things that were not done properly around COVID, et cetera. So I'm not quite sure where the Republicans are going to be going with this, but this is going to be a real opportunity for them, I think, as we try to see what's going on with this race next year. And really, the campaigning begins now. I think you're going to see a lot from Bob Ferguson. As I said, he's got literally millions of dollars in his campaign coffers and getting ready to go. But I think it's something exciting because when you talk about the governor's race, I think there's always a thought in our state that we're going to see some change. Will it be a change? I'm not quite sure because we have a Democratic governor on a long stretch, just as long as about anybody in the country. So I'm interested to see what happens next with that.
Well, this is something that all of us in terms of Washingtonians can get behind because we are talking about a possible shift in ideology and power to a certain degree. And I think that that's really key when we talk about the governor's race. Also, there are so many things that Governor Inslee's been enacting. I always think with any change of power, mayor, governor, whoever, what kind of things are going to continue and what's going to drop off. Brian? That's a huge deal.
I think it is too. The work that he's done with climate change, certainly, I think we've seen a lot of efforts around that with the legislature, certainly in this past year, talking about some of the carbon offsets they're collecting now, some of the dollars they're accepting for that now. So that's going to be part of Jay Inslee's legacy too. I will say, though, Jay Inslee was very much about trying to make sure that we created a new mental health system in our state, really trying to move away from the institutional type system and have something that was really in more neighborhoods, more communities in our state. That didn't happen. So in terms of stuff that he was not able to do, I would definitely look at that. Whoever's picking up that torch, well, guess what? You're going to have to really work on that because that's an issue that I think he did leave on the table that was not complete. So I'm concerned about that. I also want to make sure that in terms of the work that needs to be going on right now, I mean, there's some work that the legislature still needs to get done. So Jay Inslee, in terms of using his influence, really needs to work on something such that he can get the job done that the legislature did not get done. He wants to put the pressure on such that our drug possession bill, we've talked about this a few different times, that was something that the state legislature failed in its duty. And I got to say, over this past 105-day session, but there's a special session now coming up here in the middle of May on May 16th. The governor is very hopeful, or else he wouldn't have called for this special session. He's very hopeful they can get something done, but is it going to be a misdemeanor? Is it going to be a gross misdemeanor? I think the legislature still needs to figure that out.
Yeah, and I mean, in addition to that, too, I mean, he just put forth a tremendous, budget
Yeah, he did.
that
Mhm.
had a lot of money toward our houseless population.
That's true. That's true.
And that's something that I think is going to be a key marker for anyone
Yeah.
who's looking
Yeah.
to take on
Yeah.
the governor's seat, because
Yeah.
we are still dealing with these large numbers
Yeah.
of unhoused folks throughout the state.
Yeah, yeah. Affordable housing is, thank you for bringing that up. That was a big, big part of his agenda this past year. And I think the legislature took the torch up and really said, okay, we're going to be doing this missing middle housing thing, right? We're going to encourage more duplexes, fourplexes, sixplexes all around the state. I'm interested to see how that goes. There's been some investments in homelessness services too. So I think that's a huge part, Trae, because when you think about that issue, that's not going away next year or the year after that. That's something that's definitely the long haul. And if that's not front and center on whoever's running for governor, if that's not front and center on their minds, then they're missing a big, big part of it. That's what all the public polls say. They're very interested in that homeless population. They're very interested in public safety too. What's going to happen there? We had some big talk about police chases. Now we're talking about drug possession, so public safety is definitely a part of that too for any new governor who wants to throw themselves in the ring.
Well, there's an interesting intersection, I think, too, between when we talk about public safety and we talk about unhoused populations.
Yep.
We have seen that city after city, there's a lot of cities who are saying, well, we don't know if we want the shelters here. We don't know if we want, right? And so, and one of their main concerns is what's left afterward, oftentimes, right? In terms of public safety.
Sure.
And so they talk about, folks that are still dealing with addiction, that are out on the streets, and how that spills over into public safety issues. There's a lot of intersectionality there as well. And it sounds like maybe Seattle is like with this social housing. Tell us more about that, because maybe they're trying to figure out some type of middle ground, right?
Yeah, there's so many different pieces going on here. I'm glad you brought up that social housing piece, because we did talk about that on the podcast as well this week. If you'll remember, we voted for this as a city here. 57% of us voted in favor of this Initiative 135, the social housing measure. And a lot of people were a little confused about it, I think, when it first came down. But this is basically something that is set to provide affordable housing for people, not just of low income levels, but all the way up to 120% of the area median income, which is a big deal. And I want to put this in perspective here, because we're also working on the Seattle housing levy. This is separate, but that's coming up in November. And this is just something I think a lot of people might get confused. And I really wanted to break this down. So we talked about it on the podcast here. But with social housing, it's topical right now because the city of Seattle has just set this board, this 13-member board that's going to oversee this social housing network. And essentially what they're doing is they're working on acquiring different properties, and they're trying to make sure that those properties are set up such that people of low income, people of slightly higher income, they're going to be able to live in these different areas, and the rent would be maxed out for them at 33% of their income. This is important because a lot of the units we have around right now is like the Seattle housing levy units, for example. They're set at this 30% level of the area median income, let's say. So let's say you found another job and you made a little bit more than that. Guess what? You're not living in that place anymore, right? Because there's certain limits and thresholds on there. So what this new social housing measure is trying to do is allow for a little more flexibility there so that people can continue to live there. There's definitely a big push as well for allowing the different renters that are involved there to have some leadership roles there. So it's something very new. Montgomery County in Maryland is the only other jurisdiction in the United States who does this. There's a number of other places around the world. Helsinki is one of them. There's a lot of international examples with this, but we are the first city of Seattle, that's tried this in the entire nation. So I think there's going to be some stutter steps to begin with. They needed some startup money. They got about 200,000 of the 800,000 they were looking for from the state. I think that's going to be able to get them through this next year, but I'm going to be very interested in what the city of Seattle does, the council in particular, to say, all right, we're going to put some more dollars into here, because as you know, there's a lot of different places they can put their money. And are they going to be supporting the social housing measure in the same way I know they're going to be supporting the housing levy? This is where it's going to get a little bit interesting this fall, for sure.
Oh, housing galore.
You know what I mean?
This is the kind of stuff that we geek out about.
For sure.
Really. I mean, because Brian, honestly, I love the fact that we are trying something new.
Yeah.
We've been saying it time and time again, almost every time we get together. There is a need for us to try new measures when we're talking about addressing the issue that none of these other things have really been able to address wholeheartedly. And also, this is really interesting to me because as you are a family growing your income
Sure.
and looking to maybe get from affordable housing to affordable home ownership.
Right.
The gap there is large, and nothing has really been able to fill that gap. So this, for me, is one of those ways that Seattle is saying maybe this is something we can do differently, so that folks can actually build the foundation, the budget, and the financial basis they need to move from being a renter to becoming a homeowner.
It's a big deal.
That's really key, because we have to talk about that in terms of generational wealth building and moving things forward and closing the racial wealth divide. That's a big part of it, Brian.
I think
so
so too.
love that y'all were able to tackle that. Lastly, one last thing. What else did y'all cover?
We were talking about a whole ton of different things, including what was going on with the governor's race, what was going on with who could be the new governor there, and just that last piece about the different work that the state needs to do to fix our drug possession laws. That's a huge part of what we were talking about. I think the thing that I'm really interested in, and David Croman brought this up, he's the co-host, of course, on the show, and he's the transportation reporter for the Times. He was talking about the new rebuild of Elliott Way, connecting essentially the waterfront into Belltown there. I know some people have said, well, it's too wide, it's going to be too dangerous or whatever else, but some freight concerns too. Those folks need to get through, and they did add a bike lane there. I think this is one of those kind of proof is in the pudding type of situations, but I'm really interested to see how that actually plays out there, that new Elliott Way. And what shocks me about it, and I think is really challenging for me, is to realize that, wow, by the year 2025, a year and a half from now, that waterfront area is going to be done. We're going to have that hill climb coming down from Pike Place to the waterfront, and just something that has taken so long to come together. I mean, do you remember a time when it wasn't under construction down there, right?
Oh my God.
It's really interesting. And David's got a good finger on the pulse in terms of different people who are interacting with that space. What's it need to do for pedestrians? What does it need to do for bicyclists? What does it need to do for freight? And so he started the story, I would say, on the podcast here, but there's a lot more to come on that for sure.
I just love that you brought this up.
Yeah.
I was there Tuesday, right?
Cool.
And I'm like trying to find the Pier 62.
Uh-huh.
And I was like,
it's right after 61, Trae.
Yeah,
you got it.
Oh my gosh. I was like discombobulated, a bit. But I will say, and this is what's exciting, being able to see the final design of what Friends of Waterfront have been pushing for, and then to see the structure built, the foundation being framed.
It's hard to see until you see it, isn't it?
I'm telling you, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be fun. It's really going to change the look and feel of our entire waterfront and that entire area. So I love that y'all were talking about it. I was just down there, and me and my friend were like, oh my gosh. My friend was like, this looks like a whole like cruise ship almost. What they're doing.
I know.
The framework of it is very catching to the eye.
It is.
And of course, while it's building, it's like, oh geez,
I can't get around. We're
trying to like navigate all of it. But I am excited for 2025 for us to be able to see the final design and be able to utilize it in this interactive way to connect Pike Place Market and the waterfront. The fact that, wow, yes, why didn't we think of this before? There, we need that.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be amazing. I'm glad y'all were talking about
it.
Of
It's
course,
cool.
Give us how folks can catch up with you, Brian.
Cool.
And be right there while y'all are giving all of us the details on what's going on Seattle News, Views, and Brews.
You got it, Trae. Well, make sure you check out the show on Converge. It's on the YouTube channel, Seattle News, Views, and Brews. You can catch some past episodes there, too. If you want to connect with me, I can do that on Twitter. I can do that on Instagram. Look for @Callanan13 on Instagram or @Callanan Seattle on Twitter. And thank you once again, Trae, for having me here, and my folks too.
Always. And it's a pleasure. I'm glad y'all were able to join us today. It's always good to speak with you, Brian.
Back
Until
at you,
next
Trae.
time, my
Thank
friend.
you. Thank you.
Oh, y'all, thank you so much for watching. I get to wrap it all up right after this short break. Stay tuned. You're watching The Day with Trae. What's up, everybody? Me and Besa, my girl, we had to pull up to Market Street Shoes once again, y'all.
And we do this every season. We have to get the new shoes, the new boots, and this time I even got a coat.
Yeah, no, you did walk in without a coat.
I really
I'm glad
did.
you found one. But their boots were on point.
Yes, the boots, the bags. I even grabbed a flannel.
Yeah, you did. And I was able to get some hats and everything. I was really impressed.
And you know I was impressed because, of course, I got those white boots that you guys see me wearing everywhere these days.
Yeah, no, I look at your white boots and I'm like, darn it, they only have one pair. Me and Basic wear the same size. Of course, every time we walk out with several bags in hand.
Several bags and sometimes even a backpack, you guys. Make sure you check out Market Street Shoes.
Yeah, please check them out. Where they go, Basa?
Ooh, 2232 Northwest Market Street, Seattle, Washington.
COVID-19 hurt my income, my health, and my family. We were about to lose our home when we heard we might be eligible for homeowner assistance funds from the government. We called 1-877-894-HOME, and a housing counselor stepped in. They talked to our lender and saved our home. Because falling on hard times does not have to mean losing your home. Federal funding details at washingtonhaf.org.
All right, sorry, y'all. Welcome back to the Day with Trae. I'm your host, Trae Holiday. I just want to thank my guests today, Cesar Canizales and Brian Callanan and the Callanan clan for being with me. Thank y'all so much. Really, this was an episode to spotlight some of the ways that we are being intentional to tell stories right here at Converge and to be on the front lines when things are going down, but to also provide the information so that y'all can be engaged and informed viewers. What's happening within your city? How can you bring your brilliance to it? How can you utilize the knowledge to now share it with others? That is so key and important to us here at Converge and to me specifically. So I'm so grateful for the work that Cesar and Brian are both doing to keep even me engaged and informed. I'm inspired by them and the work they do. I want y'all to be inspired to do your part to see yourself as a part of the solution. And for me, excuse me, y'all, I had to burp. Until tomorrow at 11 a.m. Peace. Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. Support Converge Media today via Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at Converge Media.